This podcast is brought to you with limited interruption by Rudy Luther Toyota. Whether looking for an exciting brand new Toyota, a certified pre-owned vehicle, or getting quality routine maintenance and service for your vehicle, Rudy Luther Toyota is the place to go. Rudy Luther Toyota, the southeast corner of 394 and 169 in Golden Valley. Subscribe to the podcast Beyond Politics. They host some of the biggest names and smartest minds. Beyond Politics is from a former Democratic congressman who helped ignite Barack Obama's campaign and a former campaign manager and political columnist. They go beyond the usual chatter on politics, news, science, and books. It's politics and everything beyond. On Beyond Politics, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Broadcasting live on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota, and on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk at Night. It is the Matt McNeil Show for your Monday. Good to be with you today. Matt and Patrick here. I hope you had a good weekend. Patrick, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing pretty well. How are you today?
I'm fine. It was a nice weekend. Got a lot of family time. Got some hiking done. I'll talk about that coming up in the 4 o'clock hour. And it was nice after... Trump was here in town on Friday. He came in, and once again, we still have no idea how much the Minnesota GOP had to pay him to get up here. Tom Emmer, the Congress whip, and talk about a guy that's been whipped. Tom Emmer made the point that he himself paid $100,000. I said, there's no chance in hell Donald Trump came up here for $100,000. My guess is, and he was here, the Minnesota Republicans have an annual dinner. All the Democrats, Republicans all have like an annual dinner. It's called the Lincoln Reagan dinner, and they had him up here for that. My guess is that Trump walked away with the entire gate, every ticket cost, all the photo cost, all that. Plus, like I said, I cannot see him doing this for less than 8 figures, 10 million or more. He basically shook down the entire oil industry for $1 billion. So he's not coming up here for even $1 million. It has to be 10 million or more. So my guess is some of the local Minnesota wealthy Republicans quickly scribbled out a check and, Manservant Claude, come on over here, bring me my checkbook. I need to make sure Donnie T comes into town. Haven't done wealthy guy voice in a while. But there you go. That's my guess. Anyway, he was in town, and he said something that is so it's a lie. And once again, the media doesn't call it a lie. It's just an outright lie. He's talking about the George Floyd protests. I came in, I saved a couple of your cities. You remember that, right? I came with a big force, and we saved... No, you didn't. The national government, the military was never deployed here in Minneapolis. In regards to the national military, the National Guard locally was. So let me make sure, for the people in Chicago, let me run through what exactly happened here. Obviously, Derek Chauvin and 3 other police officers murder George Floyd in the street. The Minneapolis Police Department, which was at that point a guy named Bob Kroll was the head of the union, and that guy was really running the police department. They basically were arguing, this was a good kill. This was a good kill. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but they were justifying that this was a justified action to kill a guy in the street. And then all of a sudden we had 9.5 minutes of video come to light, which says, no, this wasn't. This was you guys clearly going crossing a line, and the city, after years of police mistreatment of the people of the city of Minneapolis, and them basically, chucking matches at the gasoline and saying, dare you to fire, it did explode. Quickly, the city of Minneapolis itself, and the city of St. Paul to a lesser point, but Minneapolis was somewhat overwhelmed. And the problem was there didn't seem to be a very good communication between the mayor and the city council and the police department. They weren't really communicating really well as things were devolving. We did have a lot of white far-right psychopaths coming into town. Governor Walz in the state of Minnesota talked about this, and he said that we had a bunch of far-right psychopaths that were coming into town and starting a lot of the problems. Too quickly, the Republican Party of Minnesota said, no, they aren't. And if you look at the people who have been caught and committed of crimes of arson and inciting a riot, funny story, a lot of them are white guys that don't live in Minnesota or they live in rural Minnesota. They weren't from the Twin Cities. But, and they when that came to light, all of a sudden it was, well, the far bigger crime wasn't burning down the building. It was that black guy that stole a tube of toothpaste from the Target store. Okay. Needless to say, the city was overwhelmed. The state was getting mixed signals from the city. I do think that Walz was a little late to the table bringing in the National Guard, but eventually they brought in, I shouldn't say the National Guard, Minnesota National Guard. They brought in the Minnesota troops, basically helped quell the problems in the city here. There is one little side note, which you probably have never heard of, Chicago, which is a gem. So Bob Kroll sends a letter to the rank-and-file union members of the Minneapolis Police Department. And in this letter, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, I can't remember exactly the verbiage, and this was shared to us by the former police chief who had retired, who was not a fan, clearly, of Bob Kroll. She shared this letter, and Bob Kroll basically made the implication that he and Paul Gazelka, at that point the Senate Majority Leader, a Republican, had been in touch with the White House to try to overthrow the governor, usurp the governor, dethrone him. And the implication was that Gazelka was going to take over the state, and I guess Bob Kroll would become des Commandant for Minneapolis. And that was kind of the argument. Now, Gazelka has been very reluctant to talk about it, but he was recorded in news outlets on one of the nights talking about, I've been in touch with the White House. Oh, really? Well, apparently the argument was, and at least someone said, the White House, we can't do that. We can't overthrow an elected governor of a state. And so they basically like, oh, we don't know. We don't know where that come from. But needless to say, Trump never got here. Trump never was here. As a matter of fact, Trump loved the riots and the uprising because he felt as if that was going to be, ammunition for his reelection campaign. How'd that go? Oh, that's right. He lost fair and square. And frankly, the culture that Donald Trump created is one of the reasons why Minneapolis imploded. The police can basically murder anyone they want. What you going to do about it? And well, the city of Minneapolis said enough's enough. But no, Donald Trump says, when he says, I came in and saved a couple of your cities, you remember that, right? No, you didn't. Nor did you send in the U.S. Army or anything. Oh, good times. I have a blog post about the Bob Kroll letter. It's on Progressive Citizen X. It's from a few years ago. I will find that and repost that tonight so you guys can see this, because that was crazy. This attempted overthrow of the governor of the state of Minnesota at the time. Yeah, it was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. We do not miss him. Donald Trump came, he left. By the way, he promised that if he didn't win Minnesota, I'm never coming back. So, yeah, he lied about that too. And no, Minnesota's not going to go for Donald Trump. Unless something insanely bizarre happens, no, Donald Trump is not going to win Minnesota. No, it's like he's going to take Chicago too. That's a pipe dream you guys have. But by the way, coming up in the 4 o'clock hour, Michael Brodkorb is going to join us to talk about the Minnesota GOP and their Senate candidate, which is nuts. The guy that's going to run against Amy Klobuchar. We'll talk about that as well. Let's go back to a little courtroom in New York City, where things have been moving somewhat around here. There are going to be some updates here I'm going to get to eventually. But the reality is that we're looking at, I don't think Trump's team is doing what they want. And there was a fascinating moment earlier today in regards to what had happened in regards to a piece of evidence. I'll get to that here in a second. Trump came into court with a number of allies once again, some of them who faced their own legal troubles or defended Trump legally. One is Bernie Kerik, the former New York Police Department commissioner who is in prison for tax fraud and false statements, and whom Trump pardoned as a president. Alan Dershowitz, the lawyer who defended Trump during his first impeachment trial, but had bristled along with being called a Trump supporter. Trump has entered the courtroom with an enormous entourage, a bit disruptive in the courtroom. It includes Kash Patel, a close ally, Gary Kastner, a conservative party leader in New York, as well as Kerik and Dershowitz. Justice Merchan says it's become apparent that closing will not take place tomorrow. Closing arguments is looking more like evidence and testimony of all the businesses before closing will happen this week, and closing arguments are probably going to take place next Tuesday after Memorial Day. Justice Merchan has made several other things clear. His pre-jury proceedings continue. As expected, he will restrict the testimony of a witness who is an expert in election law, who the defense wanted to call. He says that too much explanation of the law from an expert would overstep the role usually granted to such witnesses. They're meant to help jurors understand a certain subject area, not to explain a certain subject area. The judge's role would be to explain the law itself. Emil Bove, a defense lawyer, suggested that the prosecutors in the proposed jury instructions had shifted their theory in the case. It sounds like he's talking about the state election law that underlies the felony business charges against Trump. Justice Merchan doesn't seem to agree, but in case he says the prosecution proposal for jury instructions holds no weight at the moment because it's only a proposal. Matthew Colenglo, a prosecutor, stands up and fights back, saying there's nothing new at all about the theory in which the defense is objecting. In short, he charges against Trump are felonies because prosecutors have argued that he falsifies business records to conceal another crime. They have signaled that the other crime was seeking to promote his own election by unlawful means in violation of the state law. That includes a third potential crime. So, it's there. Part of his entourage today, by the way, is Trump's entourage was Chuck Zito, this little gem bot. He's the former president of the New York chapter of the Hells Angels. The man Chuck Zito helped found the club in the early 1980s as the New York Nomads chapter of the Hells Angels. The infamous club had started in California. The Justice Department described the organization as a criminal enterprise and linked to New York chapter of the Gambino crime family. Mr. Zito later left the biker group to try to become a movie star in Hollywood. I'm a little concerned about that guy being there because my guess is going to – would I be surprised if all of a sudden Michael Cohen disappeared and Donald Trump's lawyer said, well, we wanted to call him for a redirect, so he can't be here. You have to throw out all of his testimony and throw out the case. Why else would you bring in a guy like that as your entourage to the trial? I'm serious, too. I thought about that for a while. And like, boy, I mean, clearly I think that there was the intimidation factor. I'm guessing Cohen knew exactly who this guy is. And so, yeah, I do have a little bit of a question on why that guy, why Trump would bring him in. I don't know, maybe, he's creating an alibi for himself or something. Needless to say, if I was with the prosecution's team, I'd make sure that Michael Cohen actually has some security because at this point, the only way, unless something like this happens, I just don't see any way Trump's going to get out of this case. I don't see how in the world he's going to find some way to make this case go away in any capacity. So there is that. I'll get more to the trial and the redirect once again on Cohen, which was most of the day. The prosecution, by the way, is rested. I'll get to that as well. It's the Matt McNeil Show on a Monday. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on your Monday. By the way, someone commented to me, it's like, yeah, remember when he was telling Walz apparently to shoot the protesters in the leg, and Governor Walz like, no, sir, we can't do that. Why don't you just shoot them all? Shoot them all. Yeah. He is a horrible, horrible human being. He is. The Republican Party is going to have to spend billions of dollars to try to prevent him from becoming exactly what he is, the worst president we ever had and one of the worst human beings that has ever existed. But they will, because we got to remember that with Reagan. When Reagan left office, his approval rating was 23%. They spent millions of dollars at that point, millions to revive his legacy and make his name something that it wasn't what it should have been, because he was trash. But you think that they had to spend a lot of money with Reagan? Wait till they have to spend the money on Trump to keep him there. Or else there's going to be very quickly I don't know why you guys think that just because I basically followed him around like a lapdog for 6 years, you think that I was a big fan of his. I had my problems. Yeah, okay, sure. Anyway, back to the Trump trial. Blanche trying to looking to rope Cohen's involvement in the taxi industry in October 26 into an important month. When Cohen and Stormy Daniels, the hush money into his defense case here. Cohen is not cooperating, though Blanche seeks to build his taxi defense from the ground up. The prosecutors have told a straightforward story about the case, suggesting that Michael Cohen was motivated solely by pleasing Trump, and he paid Stormy Daniels hush money. But people can be driven to several things at once. Blanche is suggesting that Cohen may have been motivated by other things in 2016, namely his own financial interests. He suggests one of the LLCs that Cohen said he created to help with the hush money payment and actually might have been formed to address an issue Cohen had with the taxi industry. Blanche broadens his scope, suggesting that Cohen had said he was single-mindedly focused on the hush money deal, including that when he spoke to Trump that October. But Blanche suggests that Cohen would have reported back to Trump about other issues, too, including dealing with the extortion attempt against the candidate's younger daughter, Tiffany Trump. Okay, what? Someone tried to extort Tiffany Trump. Well, that would be interesting to that would be very interesting to what was that about? Attorney-client privilege, which I'll violate at some point in the hallway. Cohen stands firm, saying in response, my recollection that I was speaking to him about Stormy Daniels because that's what he asked me to take care of. Cohen is now testifying about the tech company Redfinch. Now, this is actually, they did get a hit in on Cohen on this, I think. Redfinch was hired to rig online polls in Trump's favor. Now, let's get. When you look at the New York Times polls and these polls that say, boy, Donald Trump's leading by 90, that sort of thing, there is a cash business designed to basically try to make those polls look as positive as they can for one candidate or the other. That's always existed. This is a company that basically does it. It says, hey, we'll make sure the polls go out and start looking this way. They're actually talking about rigging polls, which they did. The company was owed $50,000. Redfinch was owed $50,000, but Cohen ended up paying them only $20,000. Nonetheless, he was asked for a $50,000 reimbursement from the Trump organization. Blanche bluntly asked if he lied, and Cohen acknowledges he did. As Blanche questions Cohen on the repaying of the founder of Redfinch, who was Cohen's friend, Blanche slips in the question that makes Cohen sound extra shady. You had a duffel bag of cash. Where was the cash? Blanche hits the note that he's been reaching towards rising his votes you stole from the Trump organization, right? He says, referring to Cohen having been repaid for more than he was owed, $100,000 in all, after the money was doubled for tax purposes. Yes, sir, Cohen says. So basically they did find that, but then I think, once again, that Blanche is basically hampered by what Trump wants him to do to Cohen. That he wants him to punish Cohen, and it's just misfiring because you don't do that sort of thing in a courtroom. Even the reporters sort of noticed. So far today, the jurors seem to be less engaged as they did on when Blanche was cross-examining Cohen on Thursday. Early in the day, Blanche was making specific arguments that we could follow. He's since receded back again, introducing details that just don't connect. One open question is whether Blanche will explain as he's raising some of these details today or wait until closing arguments. Jurors are putting on their faces and shifting in their seats. Blanche has drawn a cross-examination out apparently as part of his overall goal of making the trial last as long as possible while simultaneously complaining Trump has been kept from the campaign trail. It should be noted, and I want to bring this up because this is going to come back a little bit later on, that the Trump team has delayed this as much as they can. The jurors look bored, but it's hard to see how that helps Blanche, despite what's been strong outing today by him. Trump, just sent out a fundraising appeal falsely claiming he could be thrown into prison for life if the jury in this case returns a guilty verdict. He actually faces up to 4 years in prison or probation. Trump is facing 34 Class E New York felonies, the lowest category of felonies in New York, and each count carries a maximum prison sentence of 4 years. If Trump were to be convicted of more than one count and Justin Merchant sentenced him to incarceration, it's likely the sentences would be concurrent, under which he would serve prison time just for the one count under one umbrella. So if, say, you got 3 years, they were found guilty on all counts, that basically you just get 3 years and for all counts. Todd Blanche is telling a story about greed, and he questions Michael Cohen, who has told the jury already that he wanted to be a Wall Street guy, not a lawyer. Blanche asks Cohen if he was financially interested in the case. Cohen agrees he does, but when Blanche suggests that Trump being convicted would help Cohen, Cohen balks. He's now explaining that the only thought it would benefit him because he talks about it on his podcast and television appearances. Blanche is doing a version of his inner Roy Cohen at this point, a fixer from Trump loved best. He says Cohen is willing to lie under oath if it affects his personal life. Cohen says he doesn't understand the question, which blunts it a bit. Blanche was suggesting that a conviction would benefit Cohen because it would provide a neat ending to the story of revenge against his former boss. But Cohen then threw the back in Blanche's face. He said the answer revealed something about the anti-Trump content industry. Cohen said it would actually be better for the content-generating perspective if Trump didn't get convicted. It gives me more to talk about in the future, he said. By the way, every freaking news outlet in the country is on board with that. His line, by the way, Cohen's line, elicited a laugh from the overflow crowd. Blanche concludes his cross-examination of Cohen with something of a whimper. He seemed to be trying to remind jurors of the most dramatic moment from Thursday's session, that Cohen may have lied on the stand when he described a conversation on Trump's bodyguard's phone in which he briefed Trump about the payment to Stormy Daniels. Now, that's about to come back on them. There is no doubt in your mind that was the purpose of the call, Blanche asked. No doubt, Cohen replies, meaning he stands by his testimony. Susan Hoffinger seems to enjoy responding. This is the prosecutor who jumped up and was now on redirect for Cohen. And basically, she goes at it more like a defense lawyer herself, arguing responsibly as a counterpunch. She begins with the call on October 24th, 2016, that Blanche has made much of, while Blanche suggests Cohen had lied about talking to Trump. So once again, the argument that Blanche has had, that you couldn't have been there because you couldn't be telling the truth because Trump never talked to you. Once again, this is about to come back on him. Responding to Hoffinger, Cohen said that he spoke to Trump that day. He told him that he had determined that how would he pay out Stormy Daniels. Hoffinger also notes, cutting through some of the defense's arguments, that Cohen was busy in October 2016 when the hush money payment was made. She asked if Cohen, if he was always busy. He agrees he always was. Cohen is addressing the jury directly as he tells about the hiring of the tech firm Redfinch, a rig of a poll for influential businessman for Trump. Is this something that hasn't been able to do for days? Speak freely while answering his open-ended questions. And Cohen said that Trump was upset where the poll in question had been placed, and he didn't feel like it was worth the full amount that Cohen promised to pay the company. I'll tell you what, more on this, plus a pretty big bombshell that came up in a second here. It's the Matt McNeil Show on your Monday.
Where's my telephone?
It's the Matt McNeil Show right here on WCPT 820 Chicago's Progressive Talk, as well as on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. It's Matt McNeil here. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205 is the phone number. So going back to, I want to just touch on the kind of the end of the Cohen testimony here, because it is a little bit interesting here. Cohen said, because once again, the prosecutor, the defense team actually did get him to admit, oh yeah, I stole money from Donald Trump. $30,000 or so, actually. I think it ended up being $80,000 for him, and he admitted to it. Cohen says Trump was upset about what the polling question had been placed by Redfinch. And once again, Redfinch is a company that basically rigs polls to make it look like that Donald Trump is winning. He didn't like where it had been placed and didn't feel like it was worth the full amount Cohen promised, so Cohen ultimately paid less. We're now getting Cohen's admission. He stole from the Trump organization while being reimbursed more than he was being paid. Cohen's explaining the intricacies of his decision to steal the money, saying he had originally been in the negotiations to pay the owner $50,000 after he paid them less. He would never corrected that amount back when telling Trump Organization he was owed. I just felt like it was most likely self-help, he told Susan Hoffinger. The prosecutor asked him whether it was wrong to steal the money. He does agree that it was. Cohen testifies that Trump approved his false 2018 statement about whether or not Cohen decided to pay Stormy Daniels of his own volition. As a bonus, Hoffinger and prosecutor as Cohen confirmed that one of Trump's lawyers at the time was aware of the statement, and he texted him to tell him that Trump was grateful for all he did. So he brings that forward, which once again erodes Trump's arguments. Cohen has now suggested several times he committed crimes in connection with the Stormy Daniels payoff. This is helpful for the prosecution as they seek to prove to jurors that Trump caused the falsification of business records to conceal the crime. The crime doesn't need to have been committed by Trump. Cohen's crimes are equally applicable. The jurors look a little more engaged than they did towards at the end of the lengthy cross-examination. Almost every one of them is watching closely as Susan Hoffinger questions Cohen. So here's where we get into a very interesting piece of information. So once again, Blanche's entire argument is when Cohen called on, I guess it was the Secret Service guy's phone, that he never once talked to Trump. Funny. Prosecutors have found pictures of Trump with his bodyguard, so not Secret Service bodyguard, Keith Schiller, on October 21st, 2016, right around 7:57 p.m. The defense has sought to suggest that Michael Cohen had talked with Schiller that night instead of Trump, as Cohen originally testified. Now the prosecutor will fight to get the piece of evidence in, which shows that Cohen could have talked to both Schiller and Trump on the call, as he testified he did earlier that day. So basically they've got photos, and it doesn't sound clear whether or not Trump is there talking on the phone, but at the same time, it completely blows apart the argument that Trump was never there at the time of the call. Blanche argues that the defense never said or implied that Schiller and Trump were not together that evening. So that's now all of a sudden they're frantic because their entire, that's a large part of their defense is that Cohen never talked to Trump that night. Blanche's voice raises to a higher register as he argues his points. I think it's relevant, said Justin Merchant, but he does not decide whether he will allow the evidence in. He says he wants to research another legal issue the defense raised, a hearsay issue during the lunch break. Hearsay is secondhand information, but the prosecutors argued that the evidence in question is still in video of Trump and his bodyguard Keith Schiller is not hearsay because the earlier expert witness said the foundation for it to show the jurors. We'll see what the judge says after lunch. The evidence could go some way towards defaming the argument that Todd Blanche spent a lot of time on. He suggested that Michael Cohen had lied about speaking to Trump on October 24th, so no wonder Blanche was fighting as hard as he could to keep this piece of evidence out. Earlier today, outside the courtroom, Trump told television cameras that we paid a legal expense, arguing at his lawyer, at his defense lawyer, that Michael Cohen was paid for legitimate purposes. With his use of the word we, Trump assigns himself responsibility for the way the payment was categorized before he then corrected himself and blamed a bookkeeper. So he can't help himself. This is the second time he's admitted to the crime in the hallway. Justin Merchant returns from lunch, and the ruling on the evidentiary area age before the break involve stills from a video that show Trump with his bodyguard Keith Schiller on the evening of October 24th, 2016. The defense has sought to cast doubt on Michael Cohen's account of talking to Trump on the Schiller's phone that day. Merchant says he will not allow the video stills. Now, this is not over. He said he was going to not allow the video stills that show Schiller with Trump. Those stills could have undermined the argument the defense was clearly proud of, and that was a momentum changer on Thursday, seeming to give Trump's lawyers extra boost of confidence. But Joshua Steinglass, a prosecutor, says the prosecution will seek to bring back a witness who works at C-SPAN and testified earlier so that he can verify the veracity of those stills. The judge asked when the witness, who does not live in New York, could return, and the prosecutors say they don't know yet. It sounds as if they just sought to get in touch with him during the lunch break. Blanche, whose normal MO is to try to slow things down to throughout the trial, is now complaining that prosecutors are doing just that with the effort to recall this witness. He's complaining it's patently unfair. So the guy and the team who have done everything in their power to slow this trial down to a crawl is now basically so desperate to not get this C-SPAN guy on the stand that he's accusing the other team of, you're trying to stall the trial. Oh, God. Rich. Just rich. prosecutors confirmed they were able to reach C-SPAN, which is booking travel right now for the witness, Robert Browning, who's the executive director of archives at the network. He'll be present at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Now, this is one of the things that was terrifying them. They did not want this guy up here. They were looking to get this guy up here, and yeah. So now all of a sudden the defense is in a problem because, okay, here's the judge saying, well, the guy's going to be here. We have to put them in. Their whole argument, as much as they're trying to say, well, we never said they were together, the implication was the bodyguard and Trump were not anywhere near each other. So henceforth, when Cohen called, how could he have possibly talked to Trump? The video evidence shows, well, no, they were standing right next to each other around the time of the call. Blanche objects to the decision by the judge that could compromise one of the most important parts of his cross-examination. Steinglass, almost mocking Blanche to his face, says that the witness will be very quick. Justice Merchant points out the trial has already been delayed, given the closing statements will be next week anyway. He gives Blanche the option to decide when the witness can appear. Blanche asks this talk to his team and his clients. Steinglass, the prosecutor, says that we may be able to short-circuit this process after all. Instead, the prosecution and the defense will agree to allow the exhibit in. So the defense, which was preventing these still pictures from C-SPAN showing Trump and the bodyguard together, basically, okay, fine, you can put them in because – and the nice legal analysis here, this is the second time this trial they've seen this defense. Possibly they went to go allow these in because they realized the whole witness appearing just to allow the exhibit in could draw more attention to it. So once again – they basically realized this could end up looking this really could implode the case. So the C-SPAN witness will not come back. He's not flying there, so I'm sure his day has been a delight. Continuing with the prosecutors re-questioning of Michael Cohen now, who's back on the stand. The photo of Keith Schiller and Trump on that day, which the lawyers are arguing about, was immediately entered into evidence. Blanche, having to contend with this new visual evidence of Trump and his bodyguard together at the time of the call, tries to address it directly. He asked Cohen again to confirm that he told Trump the day that he had arranged to pay Stormy Daniels the hush money. Cohen says once more that he spoke with both Schiller and Trump that evening, answering with a brisk, yes, sure, yes, sir. Blanche suggests that the famously frugal Trump would have been unlikely to overpay anyone, again harping on the disparity between the $130,000 that Michael Cohen paid Stormy Daniels and the $420,000 that Cohen was repaid. Did he happily write the checks to lawyers, for example? Trump's current lawyer asked his former lawyer. No, sir. That's called foreshadowing. So basically, Blanche tries to basically downplay the video, saying, oh, well, here it is. Here's this image. There they are together. But we still are contending you never talked to Trump. And so now all of a sudden it's no longer, how could you have talked to Trump? Because he and his, and once again, they clearly did imply the bodyguard and Trump were not near each other. They might not have said it directly, and that's why I'm saying we never said that directly. But they implied, well, the bodyguard and Trump, I mean, you talked to the bodyguard, you didn't talk to Trump. You know, they're not together all the time. Well, all of a sudden you have the C-SPAN footage showing them together at the time of the call. It becomes hard to kind of get around that. And so, yeah, their main defensive point just got imploded. Daniel Sitko, the paralegal, who's basically he was on the stand for a very short period of time. It's not clear what he was doing there, per se. You know, it's basically, yeah. He basically, I guess, was keeping a line. He works for the lawyer's office, and he is keeping a line of questions about phone calls and stuff like that. And you know, Dan Sitko, a paralegal, he was on the stand for really quick, and once again, he tried to say something, and very quickly the prosecution said, well, but you can't say for sure. And he said, not really. So that kind of ended fairly abruptly. Robert Costello, this is going to be their primary witness. He entered the courtroom dressed in a dark suit. He works as a law firm run by New York City's most prominent lobbyist. Now, he is the lawyer that, after things started falling apart, was the point guy between Cohen and Trump. And he's already let it known that he's very much pro-Trump and very much anti-Cohen. So that's kind of their whole thing, is they're going to bring him in to hopefully argue that Cohen was a bad guy. He described Cohen as an absolute maniac. or absolutely manic during the first meeting at the Lowe's Regency Hotel in Park Avenue. When he gets to the stand, he shakes his head in apparent frustration when on the witness stand as the judge sustains several objections by the prosecutors. Merchant sustains yet another objection. He's getting visibly irritated. So Costello he's a lawyer, so he knows he's got these juicy little nuggets he wants to get out there, and the judge is not allowing him. The judge shakes his head for his lawyers, approach the bench for another sidebar. Jurors are either going to conclude that Michael Cohen made up his aspects of his testimony based on the interactions with Costello, or that he's gaming out what he thought Trump might be for there. So that's kind of where they're at now. Let's see here. And like I said, it was an hour ago that they updated. Usually by now they're kind of ending. So, Costello testified he treated Cohen as a client and only as his interest at heart. He says his obligation was to Cohen in the summer of 2018, that he did not concern himself with Trump's interests at the time. Of course not. Of course not. Asked if he ever pressured Michael Cohen, he says no. Costello, again, has an objection sustained while he's testifying to his answer and by being stricken from the record. Basically, the merchant started lecturing Costello. I want to discuss proper decorum in my courtroom. If you don't like my ruling, you don't say geez, and you don't say strike it, because I'm the only one who can strike it, testimony in court. So basically, Merchant basically started when Costello could not basically present the narrative line that he wanted to put forward. Merchant basically chewed him out in court. So there's that. Susan Hoffinger, the former defense lawyer, is comfortable with the cross-examination. She grills Costello about what he told Michael Cohen as he was seeking provide legal advice. He says that Costello extolled the famous clients in an email to Cohen. Costello insists that it was his partner, Jeff Citron, who had a relationship with Cohen, and he met with him. Oh, now he's trying to separate himself. It was Jeff Citron's client, not mine. Costello is pausing before he answers simple questions from Susan Hoffinger, the prosecutor. She asked him, if Cohen is the president's lawyer, would you have been a high-profile client for him? Would it have been a big win for you and your firm? Hoffinger asked. I would say no, Costello responds. So you have Trump as a client. He doesn't think it's a high-profile client. She asked him if he would announce Cohen as a client on his website. Cohen said he's not sure what the firm would do. He now showed Costello the email sent from his own son. The email says, I will be on the team, and he quotes Michael Cohen as saying that he would be eternally grateful to have him. Costello told his son that he did not know about what the announcement would be made. His son responded, wow, that's big news. Congrats, Dad. I hope this leads to a lot of good things coming your way. His own son throwing him under the bus. He contradicts from moment to moment, or fairly clear here. He's like your standard Trump witness. He basically is just getting run around. They're stopped for the day. They'll take it back up tomorrow morning. So that was 10 minutes ago. So yeah, he gets up there and he just starts. He wants to basically go on out there and say, Donald Trump told me he's a jerk, and the judge says, no, we're not going to let you do that. And so what ends up happening is, he just gets destroyed. Anyway, there you are. You're updated for the day on that mess. We'll take a break. It's the Matt McNeil Show. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on your Monday, 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. By the way, just one quick thing here, and just really quick recap. So the defense team actually got Cohen a little bit on this, admitting that he stole money from the Trump organization. But then their main argument in their defense was blown up by a C-SPAN video, and their defendant is basically getting chewed out on the stand by the judge and being and imploding himself. They're going to lose. It's not as bad as Patrick reminded me of Rudy Giuliani, birthday party boy. If you've not seen the video, if that video is legit, it is. You see the Arizona sheriff's guy that's there to serve him being ushered into the back to help sing happy birthday to him. And that's just happy birthday indeed. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Now, let's move on to something else. Republican frontrunner in Nevada's hotly contested Senate race is quietly reframing his work with a conservative group he led last year, de-emphasizing its opposition to abortion and playing up its focus on other issues. Once again, Republicans, 50 years of saying abortion's the number one issue, always vote abortion, are now 2 years later, why is everybody focusing on abortion? No one talks about abortion. And that goes for Sam Brown. He'd been the most Republican to try to cloud their anti-abortion views ahead of the 2024 election after a series of elections in which the GOP has been punished for orchestrating the fall of Roe v. Wade. Brown, who is seeking the GOP nomination to unseat Senator Jackie Rosen in a state that is key battleground for the presidential race and the fight over which party will control the Senate. Brown, who unsuccessfully sought the GOP Senate nomination 2 years ago, led the Nevada branch of the Faith and Freedom Coalition between the 2022 and 2024 campaigns. Sounds really anti-abortion-y. Yes. The group is an offshoot of the National Faith and Freedom Coalition, a staunchly anti-abortion organization that has supported some of the toughest state-level abortion restrictions, including Texas' ban on procedure after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Brown, a former Army captain who was severely burned in a roadside bomb detonating in Afghanistan in 2008, was featured prominently in the state's organization website before declaring his Senate candidacy in July, according to archives of the site. So he was proudly on the extremist anti-abortion website, but then he announces he's running. And funny, the organization, who once again is proudly anti-abortion, knows their stance isn't popular, so they themselves scrub the website of this guy because he can win. Now, let me ask you something. Do you think that is because that organization has changed their attitude? Or do you think they're trying to trick the Nevada people into voting for this guy, and then he can basically install his far right-wing anti-abortion policies? Exactly. Today, Brown's footprint on the organization's website's essentially been erased, aside from a 2022 press release announcing his appointment as the group chairs. He has described the state organization as a spin-off of the national group. Oh, the Joni Loves Chachi of anti-abortion groups. Great. But also, and by the way, speaking and concerning Scott Baio, probably on point, but it has also called it a separate entity. It's its own thing. His campaign says his efforts with the Nevada group were focused more on the issues such as human trafficking rather than abortion. Sure they were. He was really good at keeping inventory of the supply closet. Can we just talk about that? Why are you focusing on the anti-abortion group's anti-abortion efforts? He really knew how to work a vacuum. Oh, he was fantastic that way. His efforts were focused on several critical issues facing the state: combating human trafficking, advocating for meaningful criminal justice reform, and supporting the devastated communities recovering from the COVID-19 shutdowns. Once again, so I want to make sure we understand this. The extremist anti-abortion group, which, by the way, many of them don't think COVID-19 was real, have now embraced that he was actually there for COVID-19 response. Even though the organization's primary goal is anti-abortion legislation. And I want to ask you once again, why do you think the organization, whose primary goal is anti-abortion policy, would be doing everything in their power to try to hide the anti-abortion policies of the Senate candidate if they themselves have not changed who they are? It seems like they're trying to trick people into voting for him. His position on abortion is a little bit murky. His campaign website described him as pro-life, but it's unclear where he draws the line. He supported a 20-week ban when he ran for state office in Texas in 2014. That's right. Another one of those guys that just shops around to a state to where he might get elected. Like many Republicans this election cycle, Brown says abortion legislation is an issue for states to decide, and that because Nevadans have protected such rights in the state constitution, he wouldn't support a federal abortion ban. Liar! Liar! Yes. He says he supports abortion restrictions that include exceptions for rape and incest and the health of the mother. Yeah, that's not what that organization's all about. And by the way, if you disagreed with that, why would you ever work for that organization? It's like, seriously, if you're like pro-polio, you don't go work for the March of Dimes, You're like, I don't think polio is great here, but I'm working for the March of Dimes because I'm really good at organizing supply closets. Mindful of how anger and abortion restrictions have helped Democrats in the 2020 midterms and several elections past 2 years, the Republicans have tracked to the middle on abortion, or at least they've defanged their stances. Okay, this is okay. They can't win with this issue anymore. And that's why they're trying to basically shame Democrats into getting, why are you guys only about abortion? The same political party for 50 years screamed, abortion's the most important issue. They made it, they basically booted out any moderate out of the Republican Party starting in the 1990s that they didn't have pro-life on their platform first and foremost. Now all of a sudden it's like, nobody's talking about abortion. Why are you guys talking about it? You guys just don't have any issues. No, we talk about abortion because you're on the wrong side of it. And people need to know you're all lying through your freaking teeth. You're all a bunch of liars. You will restrict women's rights the second you can. And so do not buy this dog and pony show. Buy what's the reality is they are going to take away your abortion rights. Vote Democrat. Chicago, have a good one. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Minneapolis, St. Paul, hour 2 up next. Hour number 2 of the show here on your Monday. Good to have you with us. Matt and Patrick here, 952-946-6205. Obviously, if you look at the scope of news stories, the number one story in this town and in this state over the last weekend was the Timberwolves story. Coming in at number 2 would probably be the end of session, and there's obviously some things there. But there's a story that happened that kind of got lost that Michael Brodkorb was catching. And this is insane. It has to do with Royce White being the candidate for the Republicans to take on Amy Klobuchar. And Michael Brodkorb is kind enough to join us today to talk about all the things that happened this weekend and what could be one of the worst candidates in the history of politics. Michael, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
It's great to be here today, Matt. Thank you.
My pleasure. And as well, I should want to make sure we mention the podcast, The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky. That is available at your favorite podcast place. Go catch that. And The Girls Are Gone. If you still haven't read that book, you need to read that book. It's absolutely sensational. So the first sign of something was weird was a post you made on Saturday, which is said it was like 1:45 in the morning. You took a phone call from a group of Minnesota GOP activists who are frustrated because of the actions of Jennifer DeJarnette. Now, I know Jennifer DeJarnette, she was with the Three Rivers Park system, if I'm not mistaken. What's her position with the GOP?
She's just an activist with the party, and the frustration was the changing of changing of the timing of the U.S. Senate endorsement, because the party is organizing these events and they're having these events set up, but the timing of the endorsement process was moved up, which allowed for the unfortunate events which happened on Saturday, because the endorsement for U.S. Senate was supposed to be near the end of the day, allowing, I think, the point from some of the folks that I've spoken to, allowing some time for some people to mobilize and do some time on the floor maneuvering, which happens at a lot of conventions, Matt, DFL and Republican. There's deals, there's arms twisting, but the moving up of the endorsement allowed for Royce White to be endorsed very quickly in the day on Saturday, which was a very frustrating development.
Now, there was another candidate that was running. It's a businessman out in the West Metro. He's been running. At least I've seen some things about him. I had no idea Royce White was running. I mean, what happened to that guy? Is there just a backlash against him within the GOP right now?
I'm not sure. I mean, and I don't, interest in disclosure, don't work with either of the campaigns and have no involvement in the process, but just observing, what I think it was this. I think that Royce White, showed up on Saturday. He had a video speech from Steve Bannon, which is, that's red meat to the activists inside the party in that MAGA crowd. And he was also nominated by Darren Rocha, a former regent at the University of Minnesota. And so it was a really kind of bizarre process, and Royce White was able to come in and get 67% of the vote on the first ballot, which was a strong first place endorsement for him. I will say, I think, and I've been critical of the party in the past, and your listeners know, I didn't vote for Trump in 16 and 20, and won't be voting for him this time around. But I just want to say that, Friday the former president came to town. That was a good event for the Republican Party. It was well organized, well done. There was a sense of teamwork in that room on Friday night. Saturday, some of that unfortunately could get undone because of the endorsement of Royce White. And, I think the party did a good job running the convention, but the activists who endorsed Royce White, that's a problem. And, for anyone to think that he's a credible candidate for the United States Senate or that he has the temperament and judgment to run for the United States Senate, boy, I would encourage you to spend some time on social media looking at some of his content and some of the hateful rhetoric that spewed from his mouth and from his keyboard.
You and I have talked about that, and let's just talk about the process here. Republicans are in a situation, they're taking on a very popular Amy Klobuchar in the Senate race. You're also, Trump, this is a state that has not gone for Trump. I'm not seeing anything that kind of implies this. So it's very important, I think, that the Senate candidate you have is something that kind of at least gets people out, because it's not just the Senate race. It's the down ticket race, the House races that need help here. I could think of someone like a Kurt Dowd. I could think of someone like a Paul Gazelka, even someone like a Michelle Tafoya. I'm not saying that those guys wouldn't win. I do feel as if, though they would at least keep the donations coming in, they'd be able to support the House candidate races. This Royce White, we're going to get into this because this is 1,000 pounds of ugly. Was DeJarnette, do you think she was part of this, trying to get Royce White in, or is it just because of bad management that it happened?
I can't speak to that. What I can speak to is that that set off a series of events that led to Royce White's endorsement, and it's frustration and it's problematic. I think anyone who was at that convention on Saturday, that again, job of the party is to kind of be like the NFL and kind of set up the games. It's not their job to be on the field. Anyone who helped facilitate the endorsement of Royce White, or who helped support, allowed for Royce White by voting for him. Boy, they have some explaining to do, because the activists in the seat and those who made motions to facilitate his endorsement have some questions that need to be asked of them, because I think that Minnesota is really going to see some ugliness, and they started to. And I fundamentally believe, Matt, and you and I have spoken about this. Senator Klobuchar is in a very, very strong position for re-election, and one of the things that you and I have discussed is the need for there to be good discussions. We both want this state to succeed. We both want this country to succeed, and you and I may approach it differently. But to think that this Senate race, an opportunity for ideas and discussions and debate, is going to be occupied and be filled by someone who's going to throw the type of vitriol and hatred that Royce White has already started to do is just appalling. Yeah. And anyone at the convention who supported him, and anyone at the convention who facilitated his getting the endorsement in terms of moving agendas item up and stuff, needs to really have an appreciation and understanding as to how ugly this race to the United States Senate is going to be, and it's just going to be shameful, and it shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening.
Will there be a primary, to your knowledge? Will there actually go to a primary vote, or I love this post you made. In only 6 hours, in that time, Royce White called you a dumbass, a punk, a moron. He's challenged me to a debate and told me to shut my mouth. That's within 6 hours of this. He already coming out and attacking you. This is a Senate candidate, mind you. Did the other candidates withdraw?
Funny story about that. Funny story on that. My wife saw it on social media. She goes, Michael, I'm probably gonna vote for Klobuchar as I have in the past, but I kind of like this guy's platform. He's coming out swinging at you. It was a funny joke in her house. But in all seriousness, Matt, that type of levity, that type of lightheartedness, that's really, in looking more of kind of the ugliness that came out of Royce White over the weekend and what I've seen and heard, and what I've researched. This is ugliness. This is vulgarities. This is talking in very hateful, anti-Semitic, bigoted, sexist, just raw, blunt language. And here's the game that Royce White and his supporters are going to play. The game that they're going to play is if you're critical of that rhetoric, it's because you want to attack the messenger. If you don't, by saying that by saying that you're critical of that discussion point, he's going to be dismissive, and I've seen it played out. The bottom line is this, is that this is a serious time, and we need serious leaders that are going to talk about these serious issues our countries are facing. And it's simply inconceivable to think that Royce White is going to elevate the Senate race, that he's going to attract Republican candidates, that he's going to attract Republican votes, that he's going to help be a team player to the rest of the ticket. And that's where the Republicans that supported him, that helped him get endorsed on Saturday, really did nothing but cut off their arms and really hurt themselves in this race, because Royce White is incredibly combustible and problematic.
I'm going to ask this, and you can tell me I'm wrong or anything like this. I'm going to ask this. Are the people that are supporting him of the mindset, because he's got an extensive criminal record. He has no money in the bank. He has a social media trail of hateful, I mean, really, for everyone out there, think of the ugliest social media comments. This guy's got them all over the place. Is this a case where the people that championed him have this false mentality, which we've seen play out before, that if we just bring in a minority candidate, well, that means all the minorities are going to vote for him. It's over. It's a slam dunk. It's case. Is it that kind of a flawed mentality here, do you think?
Here's what I've heard from a number of people who were involved in helping to some of the folks that supported him on Saturday. They thought, well, Republicans aren't going to win this race for the United States Senate, so why not throw a curveball into the race?
Wow.
And that's what they've done. And so I think now they're sitting back and saying to themselves, what did we do? And so the problem here is this, is that Republicans, it's a real interesting dynamic, because Friday's event was very unifying, I think, for the Republicans, which is surprising because it was Donald Trump. And as you know, I've been a Trump critic. But what I saw from social media and watching that event from my home, what I saw, people were energized and excited. That's what Republicans needed. And I think what Royce White's candidacy is going to do, it's going to divide Republicans, unfortunately. And it's not going to be value added for Republicans who are trying to win in the suburbs. It's not going to be value added for the Republican ticket statewide, because the rhetoric that this man has spewed, the hatred that he espouses, the raw bigotry and sexist commentary and language, he is going to be unhinged, and he is combustible. And I was describing it to someone earlier today. Republicans just threw a bunch of stick of dynamites in the back seat, and they now expect the voters to drive around with them over the next few months. And Royce White is going to be a train wreck. And I hope that there is a Republican candidate out there who will run in the primary. And that's not, Matt, because I think that Senator Klobuchar deserves to lose re-election, or because she doesn't represent Minnesota. Because elections and campaigns are about opportunities for contrast and ideas, and good ideas will come on that. It's American, it's apple pie, it's what our state needs. And Royce White is going to be a distraction from that. Wow. And I think that a different type of Republican who was more centered, had more depth, was less combustible, less volatile, less prone to acting in such derogatory and disrespectful ways, I think would better elevate the Republican message. And so that's the missed opportunity, I think.
To my knowledge, he had $10,000 in the bank, but he also had $5,000 worth of debt. So he's got $5,000. It's late May, and he's got $5,000 to go against Amy Klobuchar. I don't know if that's going to pan out for him. His criminal problems, what are most of those? I mean, is it small things? Is it large things? What does his criminal record say?
Well, he's got some of the things of interest. I mean, there's stole a laptop. There was a charge of a laptop related to in 2009 that's been floating around on social media. That's interesting because Republicans have brought up Senator Mitchell and what's going on with her so convincingly. So Royce White may have some type of somewhat comparable issues. I don't believe they were felony level charges in his past. But what he does have is he's got some current issues related to back child support, pending matters. He's as of today, he is constructively in contempt of court for failing to pay back child support. And so there's a number of those issues. I think there's problems that have been brought up before about his FEC reports and how he's used previous FEC funding. There was questions about some of his funding and how he spent his money related to his congressional race when he ran for Congress in the 5th before, and he was unsuccessful in getting endorsed. And so I think there's a pattern with Royce White of wherever he goes, there's a little bit of controversy, and there's problems that are there. And the question is this actually a campaign for the United States Senate, or is this some type of grift that's gonna happen here? Because to date, Royce White has not shown an ability to organize and fundraise any type of credible campaign operation without drawing additional scrutiny. And I think Royce White has problems in he has past legal issues that are problematic. He's got current legal issues that are problematic. I can't imagine, though, what's going to happen over the next 100-plus days, 160-some, 170-some days before the election, and what is going to unfold in this race, because this is not someone who is reacting well to the pressure and the scrutiny that's going to happen. I mean, Matt, let's be honest. I mean, I've never been, and people know me, I have never been one to pull a punch in a partisan campaign. No one would ever conceivably ever say that I'm a softie or that I'm not comfortable throwing or taking a punch. This is not the type of normal back and forth jockeying that happens on campaign. This is ugliness. Mm-hmm. This is ugliness and hatred and bigotry spewed at every conceivable person that you can think of. And there's not a brush he doesn't. There's not someone who isn't smeared with the rhetoric that he throws out there and that he paints on people. And if you challenge that, what I've seen so far is defensiveness. I've seen ugliness in response. And this is what Minnesotans are going to see over the coming weeks and months. Republicans don't deserve it. Voters don't deserve it. Senator Klobuchar doesn't deserve it. And so my hope is that there's a Republican alternative that comes forward that challenges Royce White in the primary. The filing period starts tomorrow. Absent that, if Royce White is the candidate against Senator Klobuchar, I think she's going to win by incredibly comfortable margins. And I think she's probably going to get a wide section of Republicans that will cross over and vote for her, as they've done in the past, because Republicans, I think, are going to want to distance themselves as much as they can from the ugliness of Royce White and the rhetoric that he's spewing.
Yeah, Klobuchar is actually quite popular in a lot of Republican districts, so it's a tough get anyway. But still, you got to look at the political game. There is, of his comments on social media, misogyny, homophobia, but one of the most ugly ones is his anti-Semitic stances. And people have called out. I mean, and what is interesting is right now Republicans are trying to point out the difference between them and the Democrats in regards to Israel. And now all of a sudden, one of your main candidates has got a long record of anti-Semitic comments online. So I mean, it's perplexing beyond perplexing. But I think you're right. I think what you've learned. I think they are planning on running him because if they're going to lose anyway, you might as well run with the most extremist candidate and just appeal to the far-right extremist base.
And Matt, I got to tell you something. Maybe I've just gotten older and a little bit more. I don't think I've gotten softer, but I've certainly gotten more sentimental. And I just don't think that's good for our state. I believe in balance. I'm obviously a Republican. I believe in the gamesmanship and the partisanship that goes on in a campaign, but this is something entirely different. This is hatred. This is hatred, and it's platforming widespread conspiracies, and someone that I honestly don't know is ready for the scrutiny that comes with the campaign. What I've seen on social media, the sophomore, junior, childish responses, that's not someone who's interested in a thoughtful debate, who is interested in having thoughtful discussions. Again, Matt, what Republicans need to understand is successful campaigns and successful politics is about addition. It's about addition and multiplication. It's not about subtraction and division. And I'm just at a loss to figure out how Royce White and his Alex Jones style of politics is going to break the code and is going to break the code for Republicans in solving why they haven't won a statewide race since 2006. Wow. I do not believe that Alex Jones politics is needed in Minnesota, and the Steve Bannon and Alex Joneses of the world, I don't think are needed to tell Republicans how they should win in Minnesota.
You and I, we don't agree upon politics. On a few things, sure, but on most things we don't agree with. But you and I come from an age where we would try to find the things that we do have common ground on and build policy off of that, making compromise and getting, kind of negotiations as you go through. I dream of those days because you're right. This is one of these people, one of these candidates in this new mentality, which is basically, it's not about compromise. It's about trying to jam something down someone's throat. And it's just hard because I dream of the day in politics where, people could actually sit down like you and I have talked politics and we could have a decent discussion about it. And it's not just this howler monkey exhibit where basically people point at their droppings and say, you have to like it. And it's like, this is insanity.
Yes. And man, I will say to you, I reject the premise that anything Royce White is spewing is Republican or the natural discourse or the back and forth of campaigns. And I get that. Royce White and his supporters are gonna go out there and they'll probably call me a rhino and call me names or call me all these types of things that I'm part of the problem. I'm not going to be gaslit by him or any of his supporters. I have a good understanding of Minnesota politics, and I have faith that the wisdom of the voters is going to be shown and that Royce White is going to be rejected handily by Senator Klobuchar and the voters of his state. I'm not going to support him. I'm not going to vote for him. And I think what's going to be sad is that who's going to lose in this process is going to be the voters. Because, again, serious problems, serious issues. There are so many good Republicans in this state. Republicans that I don't agree with on all issues, that are more conservative than me, that speak to issues differently than I do. This isn't about having there be a candidate that exactly I espouse. That doesn't exist in the world that we live in right now. But to think that we have to flip the dial so hard and go this to the right, this helps out Royce White. It helps out the grifters that are going to support his campaign. It helps Alex Jones in pushing his conspiracy theories. It helps Steve Bannon, but it does not help Republicans like David Hand, who want to run a political party. It doesn't help Republicans at the legislature. It doesn't help in any conceivable way. It doesn't help in any way. And I think that's the challenge. I guess I'm just at a point where I feel comfortable saying that, and I hope that there is a principled conservative out there who wants to be a responsible voice and talk about issues that are important this cycle. If not, Minnesotans are going to miss out on an opportunity because Royce White is not going to be a positive contributor to any discussions in the race for U.S. Senate. And I think he's just terrible.
He's going to undercut any message Republicans have on these House races, and it's really going to there isn't going to be discussion. It's just basically, what do you have to say about this? What do you have to say about this? And that doesn't do any good for anyone. Michael Brodkorb, once again, the breakdown is the podcast. Go find the podcast wherever you can find. Michael, interesting stuff. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time, my friend.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and go Wolves. I think they're still in. Go Wolves.
Yes, here he is. Our Vikings expert has decided to come into the NBA talk. Thank you, Michael. I do appreciate it. Let's take a quick break. Come on back. I want to talk a little bit more about this before we get into some other issues. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on your Monday. AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. It's the Matt McNeil Show. Okay, I'm going to Brian Evans, who's I think he works for was it with the governor or with the Attorney General's office? He's been posting some of Royce White's social media posts. This is insane. How in the hell does the Republican Party not proofread a candidate's prior statements? This is not from 6 years ago, 10 years ago. This is a post from Royce White from May 29th of last year, less than a year ago. I'll read as what I can here. These crazy whores brought you the Me Too movement. Progenitors of feminism, also vegan cokeheads that believe in numerology, astrology, and sometimes judo, Buddhist, Kabbalah, meditation, when it fits into their schedule somewhere between their recent filled oral sex reference and Satan worship. This is less than a year ago he wrote this. In December of 2022, his one whole post was just an incredibly derogatory comment towards the gay population. It just is. This is insane. What? And then there's the anti-Semitism. Okay, I get it. I get you. There just is this. There is this broken mentality that the Republicans have. That. Okay, so you got to run somebody, and like I said, I gave you three choices. Now, I think that even the most optimistic Republican would say it would be a pretty tough uphill climb, but at least you'd have some star power if you had Kurt Dowd or Paul Gazelka or maybe Norm Coleman coming out of retirement to try to run, Michelle Tafoya or Matt Burke or something like that. At least what you would do is you wouldn't get beat bad as this is going to happen. I mean, this is going to be like Neuberger. This is going to be like Neuberger. Do you remember 6 years ago when Klobuchar ran against Neuberger, and I said, can we call this race? How long after the election can we call this race in 2018? It was within 20 seconds of the polls closing, they called it for Klobuchar. Are they even going to, hey, the polls close in 2 hours, but, Klobuchar's going to win if it's Royce White. You do that, you run one of these guys, and by the way, I'm not fans of any of those guys. I am not. But you run one of those guys because at least there's some star power and there's a legitimate campaign that can be made that doesn't put every House candidate for the Republicans on their heels trying to figure out a way to condemn Royce White for his horrible things while still saying, I'm good with suburban voters. It makes me feel like is, and this is the question I asked him, is I think there are times where the Republicans just say, we're going to go find a minority candidate to run, not because that we agree with them or anything like this. It's just this feeling of, see, this is because their understanding of minorities is so absolutely, just mind-blowingly stupid. It is, since we put this person up here as a minority candidate, all the minorities are going to vote for him. That's not how it works. And I just, for the life of me, this could be. I mean, we talked about the crockpot. Kim Crockett last election cycle, the Secretary of State candidate, who was horrible. This guy makes her look like, we got FDR on the ticket. I mean, it's just, this is insanity. And here are the Republicans. I disagree with Michael about the Trump dinner, but, here they are. They're going to try to make all this hay about this. And before they're going to be able to talk about what didn't get passed in the session, the first thing you're going to be saying is, well, do you think Royce White would be your Senate candidate? Well, at least a decent news media would ask them that question, because I guarantee you, sure as heck, if this was a Democrat that got nominated and it were this bad, that every Democrat would be asked this question over and over and over again. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll give the Republicans a pass. But, dear Lord, do you put a stink all over every Republican race in the state with that guy? 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Well, come on back. We'll talk end of session, then I'll also get into the T-Wolves a little bit when we do return. It is the Matt McNeil Show here on your Monday. AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota, the Matt McNeil Show, 952-946-6205. So I want to start, let's talk about the end of session here, shall we? Because I'm going to tell you tomorrow I am going to really go after the DFL, because there is no reason in the world the ERA bill is taking this long. And when I heard 2 Democrats voted against it in the House, why are you even a freaking Democrat at this point? This is such a wheelhouse issue for the Dems that I can't take you seriously as a Democrat, a DFLer, if you're voting against this. I guarantee you, when it comes campaign time, you'll love the ERA showing up and helping you out. All the women voters, you're talking about a big supporter of women's rights. But all of a sudden, you got the chance to show it, and it fails. And I've got real big problems because I think that this is actually not just a few House members or a few senators. I think this is a DFL problem, and they should be called out and eviscerated for their failure to get that passed. Now, I'll talk about that tomorrow. It absolutely was disturbing to watch the news media of this town, the political news media, absolutely get dragged around by the nose by the Republicans. Because, okay, let make sure we understand what exactly happened here. For 3 weeks, the Republicans were basically doing everything in their power to stall this. And as a matter of fact, I could criticize the Democrats for allowing, every time there was a bill up for debate, there was 8-9 hours of debate going on it. Usually after the first hour or so, all you had was the rehashing of the same issues over and over and over again. Very little new. I would have cut off debate after 6 hours on these bills, and yet they let them go on and on. But to be fair, this was by design. The Republicans decided to try to overwhelm the system, which to a point I'm not going to say they're successful. They stopped 1 or 2 things, but yeah, they definitely didn't stop everything. But that being said, they were terrified of the ERA bill, so they wanted to desperately stop that. I don't think they wanted to stop the bonding bill. I don't think they wanted to stop that, but that got stopped. I think that the plan was for 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, the Republicans did everything in their power to basically stop the functionality of the legislature, and they somewhat succeeded. Now, is that illegal? No, that's just the process. But that's what caused what happened yesterday, where the Democrats were basically just trying to put bills together to get things passed. And as every Republican storms out of the House, I can't believe you did this. You stop with your dog and pony show. You guys had a meeting beforehand saying, no matter what happens, we're going to storm out of here. We'll make it seem like this. And the amount of Republicans who was like, I have never seen people treated as badly as this. You haven't? Let me give you a little tour, Republican Party of Minnesota. Do you remember when you guys had all COVID and you likely killed one of your senators? You remember that because you had a celebration party a few years back during the COVID outbreak and you didn't require masks or social distancing. You just had a big party because you thought it was fake and a bunch of you got COVID. And like I said, you likely killed off one of your own senators. Do you remember how you came back into the Senate and you never told the minority party that there were sick people running around with them? Remember that? Because that was pretty disturbing. Do you remember when Kurt Doubt put the mute button into the speaker's chair? I've got a picture of it. I've got a picture of the mute button that used to exist there, that he put in there, and he was actively muting microphones when he didn't want to hear someone talk. Do you remember when Republicans would go on out there, and when they were in charge, they would throw a 1,000-page bill at the Democrats and say, you vote in 5 minutes, a bill no one had seen. They had never had a committee hearing on it. They didn't have any forthright. This was all bills that were written by either the National Republican Party or by special interest groups with a handful of Republicans, and they'd throw the bill out and basically say, you got one chance to vote on it, vote now. And that was what it was. Remember that? Because I remember that. You guys did that all the time. So, by the way, on that one specifically, you guys acting like this is some sort of great injustice. You guys had committee hearing after committee hearing. Your voices were heard. Your whole argument is, well, unless you took the minority party and passed their bills verbatim and said, sorry for getting in your way, you're acting like this was some sort of great injustice. Good luck with Royce White, by the way. You guys are acting like this is some sort of grand injustice. I can show you injustice. If you're trying to act to me like giving you guys hours after hours after hours to bellow on the House and Senate floor over the same thing over and over and over again is somehow on par with you guys throwing 1,000-page bills at the Democrats and saying, vote now, you don't have time to read it, vote now. Bills that no Democrat had seen. That's you guys. That was a far grander injustice than anything that happened yesterday. I'll go with the fact that you guys are supporting a guy that has more criminal indictments than a mafia don, for God's sakes. And you think that he's pure like Jesus. You guys are nuts. But I once again also want to say, you guys are the ones who intentionally stalled this process till the end. That's why it was extremely disappointing to watch the news media of this town say, boy, did Democrats overstep their bounds. Now, nothing the Democrats did yesterday was illegal. It was all procedural. It was all legal to do. In the same sense is what the Republicans did was stall everything, which is legal to do. No one did anything illegal. But funny, the news media of this town sure as hell acted as if, well, the Democrats were the bad guys. At least that was the narrative this morning until I made my post. I made this post, and this is, 320 people so far. Twin Cities journalist, if your coverage at the end of the legislation session only badmouths Democrats and at no point you bring up the intentional 3-week derailing campaign of the GOP, then you are intentionally leaving out the cause of the problem. Stop doing be the PR people for the Minnesota GOP. And I know what happened. You guys were all tired. Republicans sent in talking points. They sent in, here's all these people. You got this fiery rhetoric, and you ran with it. You're a bunch of freaking fools if you left out the part. You're basically trying to describe the Titanic scene again without talking about the iceberg, for God's sakes. The iceberg are the Republicans. They're the ones that sank the damn ship. And you guys are like, well, those Democrats were pretty frantic. Yeah, why? Because the Republicans stalled everything. That's not on the Democrats. And shame on every single Twin Cities journalist who did not make that point from the beginning. Because that shouldn't have been in paragraph 20 in your story. That should have been in paragraph 1. Due to the fact that the Republican Party stalled all proceedings for the last 3 weeks, Democrats chaotically had to end the session. Ta-da! You see, I'm not a freaking journalist. I'm a trained chimp sitting in a room, dude. How in the hell can I do your job better than you? Seriously, how the hell can I do my job better than you guys? And don't give me your pompous, arrogant, oh, the heathens talking to us via the radio. Come on, do your damn job. Stop taking GOP talking points and trying to massage them into a story. Pathetic. Somebody has to call you out. All right, so here's what did get passed. Here's what didn't get passed. What got passed, Uber Lyft bill. Now, I think Uber and Lyft realized the writing was on the wall, that the state was basically going to tell them, oh, the heck with you, bye. We already have 2 brand new rideshare services in Minneapolis, St. Paul, who are willing to pay the higher rate to the drivers. So I was of the mindset of let them go. But I think Uber and Lyft, basically, my guess is there's going to be a lot of campaign donations from Uber and Lyft to Republican, well, mainly to Democrats, really, to Governor Walz and stuff, to basically pull up this deal to keep them in town. And you can tell that this was something like this. When Uber and Lyft when you see the press releases as, boy, are we sure disappointed in this pay raise, but we'll stick around and deal with it. Yeah, you guys basically realize that you are about to lose a major market, the 17th largest market in the country, to these other riders, and you just didn't want to. So you basically had to pay people off to basically write a piece of legislation to try to smooth this over. So, yeah, the Uber Lyft bill did get passed. Emergency medical services, rural ambulance providers made They're basically, you need to get more ambulance drivers out there, especially with lack of hospitals. Once again, Republican policy in rural Minnesota, they're not funding money for rural hospitals. So that's a good one. Gun bills, lawmakers managed to push through 2 changes of the gun laws. The bill the pass increases penalties for straw purchases, which occur when that person legally buys a firearm on behalf of the person who's prohibited from purchasing one. It also bans binary triggers. I think you're a bunch of cowards for not passing the report your stolen gun to the police bill, because a good guy with a gun would tell a cop when their gun was gone. So the only people that were upset about this are the people that want the unfettered amount of guns on the streets. Oh, and the people that know the guns are getting on the streets because rural white guys are buying them out in their country, driving them to the city, selling them in the back of the car, and then claiming, oopsie, my gun was stolen. If you put a requirement in there to report the gun, guess what? All of a sudden, you'll dry up gun sales, illegal gun sales in this state immediately. That's the ugly little truth that the Republicans don't want you to realize. They made some changes to the cannabis bill. The copper wire theft is now in effect. You can't sell copper anymore without a state-issued license. I don't know what that means about going to Wisconsin, but my guess is Wisconsin, scrap dealers are about to get a bunch of Minnesota copper. Paid leave changes, child tax credit changes. They got rid of historic horse racing machines. I have no idea. I don't gamble, so I have no idea what that is at the racing tracks. Medical debt collection was restricted, and insurers will no longer be able to use prior authorization to decide what they pay for a certain cancer. What did not pass, the Equal Rights Amendment, shame on you, DFL. You had the opportunity. Bonding bill didn't pass. Sports betting didn't pass. Ranked choice voting didn't pass. I know the Republicans wanted both the bonding bill and the sports bill. The sports bill's got a really weird, group that's behind it. It's left and right. But, the bonding bill, I know a lot of Republicans wanted that passed. I doubt that they're going to have a special session, because I can imagine that the Democrats are going to demand that the ERA bill is part of a special session, and the Republicans will never agree to that. And the Democrats are fools if they thought they might get that in later. But I actually, like I said, tomorrow I'm going to tear apart the Democrats on this, because I feel as if this is the DFL just playing footsie with this issue. This should have been passed years ago, and you guys keep finding ways to, oops, I guess we're not passing it this year. Come on. You guys need to do a better freaking job. 952-946-6205. All right, we'll take a break, come back. Positivity at the end of this show when we talk the Timberwolves. It's the Matt McNeil Show. AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, the Matt McNeil Show. So, the T-Wolves, first of all, I want to make sure we all understand they didn't win the NBA championship last night. As impressive as that game was, they still have 8 more games they need to win, right? We all understand that, right? Because there's a lot of people acting as if that team is the champion. And I'm like, okay, isn't this the problem we got into after game two in Denver? And we came back home, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a second, these teams are good. There isn't a bad team left. And even if you have to take on Indiana in the East, you're still going to have your hands full. I mean, granted, I think outside of Boston, Denver is the toughest team the Timberwolves could have matched up with this entire playoffs. But you still got a Dallas Mavericks team that did knock off the Oklahoma City Thunder. And so you're going to have to figure out a way to knock them back. That being said, what happened last night, Patrick, I mean, you're just not me. I mean, I'm a longtime sports fan. You've followed sports a long time. It's just kind of hard to wrap your head around how all of a sudden the Timberwolves just in the third quarter turned it around and just instantly, and all of a sudden they were just two different teams.
It was kind of like they swapped jerseys at halftime, because you and I were talking off air earlier that in the first half, the Denver Nuggets said, we're going to take Ant Edwards away, and if your other guys beat us, that's fine, but we don't think they can do that. And in that first half, they did not. They took away Edwards, and the rest of the Wolves just did not pick up the slack. But in the second half, the Wolves started saying, all right, well, we'll take away Jokic and make his life more difficult, and as well as Jamal Murray, who had a very hit or miss series. He was either scoring 35 or he was scoring about 6. And in the second half, the Wolves took those two guys away, and then the Cat started getting hot, and Naz Reid had a much better second half. So that strategy that, your secondary guys can't beat us didn't work anymore.
So, yes. Okay, thanks, Patrick. No, but that's actually, he's exactly right. He's spot on with that. And, Ant didn't score 40. I think, what was his total? What was Ant's total last night?
I think he had 16.
16. It was a very mediocre night for him. His defense was exceptional. I mean, that's the thing that's crazy about this entire team. This is why so this morning I'm running and I'm watching ESPN and they're talking about this. And the point they're making is, okay, no one is comparing Anthony Edwards to Michael Jordan during his championship runs. But I remember Michael Jordan in the mid-'80s, late 80s, when he came on out, and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson had no idea what the hell they were dealing with that kid. And he was, not only was he an offensive machine, but at times he was the best defender on the court, hands down. He was that good. And I remember and of course at that point the Bulls had to take him on in, the Celtics had to take the Bulls on in the East, and they I remember that one series, the first series that Jordan's coming out series, when he took the Celtics to 7, and, they're just sitting around like, who in the heck is this guy? And the entire Celtics team looked old real fast. Well, let's face it, they all looked old anyway. They all looked like they were 70 when they were playing. Anyway, it was a solid win. I've never seen anything like that. You got to win 8 more games, so make sure you stay focused. Native Roots Radio is up next. Have a fantastic day. We're back tomorrow. Until then, see ya.